So, we have talked about people expecting the world teacher to come and give them the new teachings which will transform their lives, and they were preparing themselves for that. And this preparation went on for almost 17 to 18 years. Like say, if we say that in 1911, this process started with the founding of the Order of the Star in the East. It continued, and then in 1929, that was the year. So, from 1911 to 1929, 18 years, people have been waiting for the world teacher to manifest, doing all possible things, whatever occurred to them, that they should do, so that they will be ready to receive him or his teachings. And in 1929, in the gathering at Holland in Oman, and that was I think 2nd August 1929, which was the inaugural day of the gathering, the first day of the gathering. Krishnaji simply announced that he was dissolving this Order of the Star organization, and which was quite a shock for most of the audience. They didn't expect this kind of action. And then Krishnaji gave a talk on that day, explaining why he was dissolving the organization, and that is where he said, truth is a pathless land, and how no organization can help you reach the truth. So, the interesting thing is, when they were preparing for the coming of the world teacher, Krishnaji used to refer to world teacher as a third person. That when he comes, this is for how we should prepare to receive him and all these things. But in this talk, he was referring to him as a first person. Like he is saying, you have been waiting for me for all these 18 years, and now when I come and tell you something, you are not willing to listen. So, which is an indication that the world teacher had taken over and began his work on that day, the 2nd August 1929. And that famous talk he gave. And it is interesting to go through the kind of situation that led to this action by Krishnamurti. And you can see that those kinds of things happen in any organization. And so, even the Order of the Star was not exception. It happened with them also. So, there was membership. So, there was this feeling that if you become a member of the Order of the Star, then you get linked with the world teacher, and then you are a special person compared to the non-members, and then you are closer to the world teacher, and world teacher will give you special teachings by which you will maybe realize or liberate before the non-members, or before the non-members can achieve that. And there were more than 100,000 members of that organization all over the world. And in such a big number, some members wanted to be even more special. So they started various orders within the order. So that was Order of the Star in the East. So in that Order of the Star in the East, they had started another order. And they said, okay, that is the Silver Order. And the members belonging to Silver Order were given a silver star to distinguish them from the other members. And there were so many Silver Star members that some members wanted even to be more special. So they were given the Golden Star. So they were golden members. And it went on. And then there was the Purple Order. So there was Silver Order, Golden Order and Purple Order. And along with the stars, they were given the corresponding shawls. The silver colored shawl, the golden colored shawl and the purple color shawl. And whenever the gathering used to take place of the Order of the Star in Oman, these members will wear those shawls and display themselves as special members, and others should respect them. And they went even a step further. Some few persons, they declared themselves as apostles of the world teacher. The world teacher is the Messiah, and they are the apostles of the Messiah. That means all his teaching will pass through them. They will be the interpreters. They will be the communicators between the world teacher and the rest of the human beings. And they declared themselves as apostles. And they said that when the world teacher comes, they will be surrounding him and then making his work easier, simpler, smooth, and all those things. And Krishnaji didn't like any of these things happening. Right? And so this was being almost being imposed on him. So I think at Adyar, in one of the Theosophical conventions which Krishnaji was attending, he was asked whether he would accept these people as his apostles when the world teacher comes. And Krishnaji said that he will accept none of them. None of them is the apostle, and so on. And meanwhile, some of those apostles, they declared also that they got higher initiations, and they declared that CWL and Annie Besant, they have already become Jivan Mukta, they have taken that initiation. And some of the apostles, they have taken the fourth initiation, and so on. And all this list was published, who got which initiation. And when the matter came to CWL, he denied all those things. He said none of this thing has happened, and these are being misled by the dark forces. No such thing has happened. And so you should dissociate yourself completely from these things and have nothing to do with it. And with that message, I mean, they were successful in involving Annie Besant also in all this. But the moment CWL's message came, Annie Besant completely dissociated herself from all this, and she was out, nothing to do with these things. And so all these apostles and all those things that even before the coming of the world teacher, Krishnaji had already declined to have these apostles and all those things. But still all this feeling was prevalent, and feeling special just because they are a member of some organization was very, very prevalent, and all this comparison and the corresponding jealousy, because natural, a silver member would always want to become a golden, and golden always wanting to become purple, and so on. So all those things, I mean, so the matter had gone to that extent. And Krishnaji watched it for almost 2 years. 1927, 28 or 28, 29, he watched what was actually happening. And then after careful consideration, he decided that better to dissolve this organization and finish all these things. And so he took that decision in 1929, and on the very first day of the gathering, he announced that he was dissolving the Order of the Star. And he said, being the president of that organization, he is empowered to take any action vis-a-vis the organization, and so he was dissolving it. And then he said he didn't want any followers, nobody is his apostle or nobody is his interpreter, nothing, and he was not interested in having any follower at all. And while explaining why he was dissolving, he said that why the organization is necessary at all. I mean, if you consider, say, you say that you are a member of this organization. Now, in what way you are different from the other people by being the member of this organization? Right? You are just like any other person. The membership has not created any difference between you and the others. You are just the same. Then what is the significance of that membership? It is just a label that I am a member of this organization, and then taking pride in that and all those things. And he said that the spiritual organization is very destructive. As far as spirituality is concerned, the organization is a hindrance. So there should not be any organization for spiritual matters. And he said spiritual matters are completely individual, personal, and they have to be approached in that way. And that's why and then there he declared truth being a pathless land, and you cannot organize truth. And there he mentions that story also in that same talk about a devil walking with his friend, and then they see a person, third person, picking up something from the road, and the friend asks the devil, what has he picked up? So the devil says, he has picked up a fragment of truth. So then the friend says, that means it's going to be difficult for you, because now he has got the truth. So you are in trouble. So devil says, no trouble, nothing. I will just make him organize it. Then everything will be okay. So through that story, he tried to point out that organizing a truth is the devil's act. And therefore should not be organized at all. And no organization should be formed around truth. That is what he declared in that talk. And he also said that, yes, this is not a very great act to be applauded and all these things. And he said that, yes, when this decision is being announced, I am sure some people will be very happy and some people will be very dismayed. But he is not acting from that point of view at all, but he is acting because the organization is really not necessary in the exploration of this truth or this inquiry. So in this, we see 2 points, which is truth is pathless. That is one point which is quite contrary to our belief, because the tradition says that all paths lead to truth and each one can have his own path to truth, depending upon his special situation and so on. But here he is saying there is no path to truth. So, which is quite a contrary statement. And the other point that comes out of this is, he says truth cannot be organized. So, why truth cannot be organized? I mean, what happens when truth is organized? I mean, probably we will inquire into these 2 points. Now, first of all, why truth is pathless? So, he says that truth is not something fixed, something stationary. Truth is something living, something moving. And when something is living, moving, you cannot have path to it, because by the time you build the path, it has already moved, it has already changed, and therefore you have to again think of a new path, and by the time you make that path, it has again changed. And this way you can keep on playing hide and seek game, and you will never reach truth, or you will never come upon it. And so he says the truth has no path. You cannot build a path to truth, because it is moving and living. And then how do you come upon truth? So that he has explained a little bit in the core of the teachings, which we will be considering in our just next session. But maybe we can consider it here, and then we have many other things to consider from core of the teaching in the next session. So we may as well finish this in this session itself. So then, how does one discover truth? How does one go about it? So he says that it is possible to discover the truth only through observation. Observing yourself, not the observing what is happening around you and all those things, but observing what is happening within you. And so, which means that the path, if at all we can talk in terms of path or the way to truth, is through your own life, not outside your life. And which means that you have to understand your life first. Only then you can move through it and try to explore truth. So through observation of yourself. So how do you observe yourself? Can you observe your face? Can you look at your own face? You cannot. So you need a mirror. So in the mirror, you can see your face exactly as it is. So similarly, if you want to look at yourself, what you are, you need a mirror. A mirror which will show you exactly what you are, psychologically. So such a mirror, he says, is the mirror of relationship. So in your relationship, or that relationship shows you exactly what you are. Relationship is the interaction between you and the other, between you and the environment. And in that interaction, whatever real you is, that is what is visible in that interaction, in that relationship. And therefore, that is the mirror, he says. So through that mirror, if you are able to observe yourself, then you will know exactly what you are. And that way, you can observe yourself. And when you start observing yourself in that way, then you will start understanding your whole makeup, your whole background, your identity, what you are, and so on. And then through that understanding, right, when you have more or less have understood, or rather you had realized as to what you are, right, then maybe a different kind of sense you may come upon, which is not any of these things, which is quite different. Of course, if I go further into details, then I think this will be talk on the core of the teaching. Anyway, we will mix up both the things. I think we will not divide the two sessions sharply, but it doesn't matter. So, how does this observation lead you to truth about life? That is the question. Yes. So, he goes on further. He says that when you start observing yourself, you find that you have lots of images within you, and you have formed these images in order to feel secured. These images, they become your shelter, and you hide behind them. And so these images, they become the hindrance in your process of observation. They cloud your observation so that you are not able to see at things or see things exactly as they are, but as they appear through the screen of these images. And he says, all these images, they make up your consciousness, that is the content of your consciousness. And the feeling of individual separate consciousness, he says, is a myth, is an illusion. Your consciousness is part of the total consciousness. It is part of that, and therefore it is not separate at all. And your identity based on this content of consciousness is also a false identity, because the content is constantly changing. So the identity is also not fixed, it's not unique, because today you are this, tomorrow you would be that, and so the identity is also not unique. And since you don't have unique identity in terms of the content of consciousness, you are not an individual. Because individual means you are unique, but you don't have anything which you can point out as unique, because whatever you point out is the content of consciousness, and which is common to the rest of the human beings, and there is nothing unique about that. It's only, you can say that maybe a combination of various content of that creates a sense of uniqueness, a sense of being different than some other similar collection. And so each one has collected his own contents from the total consciousness and then projecting it or taking it as his identity and considering himself as unique. But there is no uniqueness here because the content is common. It is not permanent, it is changing, and so cannot be your identity or it cannot be your uniqueness. And then he says that when you realize this, therefore don't seek the identity or uniqueness through the content of consciousness. Then this content of consciousness doesn't have much significance. And he also further says that this observation into oneself shows you that observer is not different from the observed. And he mentions that observer is the observed, the experiencer is the experienced, and the realization of that is the insight. I mean, now I am introducing so many terms without explaining any of those things, but that we will do in our next talk, all these explanations. And through that insight, then a radical mutation is possible. And that radical mutation is the truth. So this is the journey. So I have almost quoted the whole of core of the teachings here. That is the journey to truth. And there is no other path. Another interesting point in this is he considers truth as a completely different dimension. And therefore, there is no path to truth. I mean, to explain in terms of dimension, if you consider this plane, the floor, as your world in which you live, then the truth doesn't lie on this floor. The truth is a completely different dimension, which means that it is outside the floor, right? And then you are busy in creating paths in the floor. So any number of paths you can create, you can never reach the truth, because truth is not there on the floor at all. It is somewhere else. And so no path can lead to that truth. So here, not the path, but the flight is required. But what does that flight mean? So its only thing is that as you are observing yourself, as you are observing the content of your consciousness, as you are observing your reactions, right? out of that observation, a sense of not belonging to the observed, not belonging to that field arises. It's a very subtle sense, and you have to be quite sensitive to sense it. The moment you are able to capture that sense, then you are already out of that field, you are already out of that floor, you have already raised yourself outside it. So, that is the quality of observation, that is the quality of awareness he talks about. And it completely falls logically in line with his other statements regarding this freedom or regarding this other dimension. Like say, he says that the very first step which you take in order to be free has to be in freedom. It cannot be in bondage. The very first step towards freedom has to be taken in freedom only. Because any number of steps taken in the bondage, they will be bonded steps only. They cannot be leading to freedom. And this is what many people find very difficult to understand, because they feel that it's a process. Reaching freedom or reaching truth is a process. So, you take first step, second step, third step, and step by step you finally reach the truth or that state of freedom. But here Krishnaji completely denies or negates the step by step approach. Because once you allow steps, then you say, no, these steps are too long, let me have smaller baby steps and so on. I mean, it is all endless, and any number of steps you take, I mean, you are going to remain in the same field, will not be able to come out of it. And so, the very first step has to be the step in freedom. And if it is the step in freedom, you don't need the second step. And so, we come to his famous statement, which says the first step is the last step. There are no steps in between. The first step itself is the last step. So, you don't have to take any other step. Now, this becomes very difficult for us to accept, because we are so much used to the process, things systematically happening one after another and finally reaching. But that is how the processes at the physical level, the physical world, they happen. You take any chemical reaction, you take any process of any happening, you will say that yes, there is definite steps, definite stages happening in definite intervals of time leading to the final state. But here it is not so. So, the approach is totally different, and we who are used to the processes taking time to learn, to change and all these things, we find it very difficult to accept or to understand that without time how can we do this? Because everything seems to need time, and here he says don't take time. So, what he is saying is, when human beings are living a bonded life, they are living a life of the content of consciousness, and in that life there is absolutely no freedom. All your activities, all that you do is controlled or is as per that content, and therefore in the real sense you are not free at all. You are the slave of your own content which you have gathered. And so there is no freedom there. And he says that the only freedom possible for such a human being is through this awareness, through this kind of observation. So there is only freedom to be aware, to observe. That's the only freedom a human being can have. No other freedom in this. And once a human being is free in that sense, that means he is aware of what's happening within him in his life, then in that awareness is the freedom. And in that freedom, then he can look at things exactly as they are, and then those things, they have their usual fate, in the sense that as the reactions arise, they also subside and are over. So in that sense, then things start getting worked out in his life, and as things are getting worked out, there is more sense of freedom. I mean, when some burden is off your head, how light you feel, how free you feel. So something of that kind of sense you start experiencing within you as the psychological burden starts getting lightened up. So from that point onwards, Krishnaji then set about his mission, his work, and he said that his only mission was to set human beings absolutely free, absolutely and unconditionally free. And he was not concerned with various systems, methods, organizations, frameworks, and all those things. And he went about it. He said he didn't want followers, because you cannot come to that freedom by following anybody, including him. Because follower doesn't understand anything. He simply follows. If you ask him, why do you follow? That is the only thing he can do. There is an interesting thing that a row of ants, they are walking, and you arbitrarily catch hold of one ant and ask, why are you walking that way? He says, no, the ant before me is walking that way, so I am also walking that way. So I think that is how probably is the state of the followers. They follow because the other fellow is also following, and so on. And following doesn't lead to any understanding or any insight. And therefore he didn't want any follower at all. And he also didn't give any commands or any do's and don'ts, because if he tells you what to do, then you will become a very obedient disciple, very obedient student. But you will not understand anything. You will say that because my guru has asked me to do this, I am doing this. And I don't understand anything of what's happening. So he didn't want that. So which means that the central approach to life, according to Krishnamurti, is the understanding, based on understanding. So he doesn't tell you what to do or what not to do, but he asks you to understand what you are doing, why you are doing, what is the motive, what do you want to gain out of it, and so on. So he will not tell you, don't do this, this is wrong, or do that, that is very good, all these things. He will say, find out. Find out for yourself what is right, what is not right, what is good, what is not good. And then you are your own boss, because you have found out, you are free to live according to that. And this many people find very difficult to accept, because they are so used to following, so used to depend on others to tell them what is right and what is not right, what they should do, what they should not do. I mean, that is how we have been brought up. Even among our children, I mean, you must recall that how all the time you keep on telling them what they should do and what they should not do, or what is right and what is not right. And even in the school also, more emphasis is given on a student following the teacher's instruction rather than discovering for himself what he is wanting to learn. And so right from childhood, we are groomed into that kind of mentality. And so when we start living our own life as a grown-up human being, we still carry the same mentality, and we are seeking advice, we are seeking some guidance, we want to depend on somebody, and we want somebody to tell us what we should do or what we should not do, and so on. And such human beings are not intelligent human beings. And the world teacher wanted the human beings to be intelligent, because only when you are intelligent, you can really cooperate. Without intelligence, cooperation is not possible. Because without intelligence, you won't know where the cooperation is required or what it means. But with intelligence, you are able to see. And you are also able to see where the help is required, where it is not required, and so on. And when you see that help is required here, then you don't wait for somebody else to help. But if you can help, you will take initiative and finish that matter. So in that way, I mean, the perfect cooperation happens. And that is possible only through intelligence. Without intelligence, it's not possible. And intelligence is only when you on your own try to understand, try to find out. So that is the, I think, central point of the approach of Krishnamurti and his teachings. See, based on understanding. And then his expression was quite theosophical, because he had just moved out. I mean, we can say that the available expression to the world teacher was whatever that was available, so which was quite influenced by theosophical way. So it took some time for him to come out of it. So you will find that from 1929 to 1933 or even up to 1938, lot of expression is quite theosophy oriented or theosophical, and through that he is trying to take out the listener from that framework, because you cannot come to truth through any framework, because that framework will prejudice the truth or cloud the truth, won't be able to see things as they are. So his real expression started post Second World War. So 1945 the World War was over. 1946 the ban on Krishnamurti giving talks was lifted, and then he started giving talks. So after Second World War was over, he started giving talks at Ohio, Sarovia and that locality. And then in 1947 he came to India, all this. So if you read his talks of that period, you will find that yes, he is moving away from the theosophical expression and trying to find his own expression, trying to find his own words, trying to put things in quite an independent way, which will not require support of any other framework in order to understand. And that way then one can say that although the teaching content wise remained the same, the expression kept on evolving. The expression kept on becoming more and more precise. And so if you, even as a samples, you study his teachings from 1947 to 80s, you will find there is quite a change of expression, there is quite a change the way he uses words and the content behind those words. And then people then have formed these ideas that then what is, from which year the real teaching starts. Because as the expression is varying, then which expression is the true reflection of the teachings. So from that point of view, they say that at the feet of the master is not the world teacher's teaching. And so it cannot be regarded as Krishnamurti's teaching. And then all the expressions before that, because they were theosophy influenced, therefore that also cannot be called as world teaching. And if you say that from 1929 onwards, the teaching is that of the world teacher, but yet the expression was not that clear. I mean, you couldn't understand in a pinpointed way what exactly he is trying to say. And therefore, even that they say is a little bit doubtful, although it may be authentic, but difficult to understand. So maybe 1947 onwards, whatever he said, maybe you can start your study from that. And once Sunandaji, she asked Krishnaji that people talk about these various time periods. So which teachings or teachings belonging to which time period should be regarded as most authentic? So he said 1980 onwards. So if it is 1980 onwards, then I think the best way to go about studying his teaching is start from 1980 onwards, study it, and when you understand it in more or less, at least intellectually, or more or less you know what he is talking about and all those things, then you can study his earlier versions. Then there is less likelihood of misunderstanding it. Otherwise, people get very confused that he was saying this and now he says that, and so has his teaching changed? Usually that is what is advised, that you study his latest, that is 80s, whatever he said in 80s, and once you understand more or less what he has been saying, then you read the previous versions, go through them, then you are more likely to understand it. And not only that, but you will be able to also say that, okay, this expression, he instead of this it should have been that. Like that you will be able to make out also. So all that continued, and he kept on traveling all over the world, giving talks, holding dialogues, pointing out, and during this he came down to many more details. I mean, talking in terms of our day-to-day life, up to that level he came and started showing how the teaching works there, or how it can be applied there. And the interesting thing is, just before his death, he made a statement which again created a lot of, you can say, a hue and cry. And some people even went to the extent of saying that that last statement cannot be considered as part of his teachings because it is so different than the general vein of his teaching, therefore cannot be considered as part of the teachings. But when Krishnamurti himself was asked, actually when that statement was recorded, the person who recorded that statement, he asked Krishnaji that, sir, how can you say this? It goes quite contrary to whatever you have been saying all these years. So he said, no, no, don't interfere in this. You have nothing to do with this. This is so. And he took promise from that person that nothing will be changed from this statement. It will be kept exactly as it is. And that is part of the teachings. It's not outside the teaching, and so on.
What was the statement? What was the statement?
Yeah, that statement actually we are considering. We'll be considering it in the last session of this series. So it's not an invitation or incentive. I mean, I don't have to keep you waiting till then. Yes. No, he talked about the supreme intelligence functioning through his body and how the body was specially prepared, why was it necessary, and said that such a body is not possible for many hundred years to come. And then has the humanity lost that intelligence? That means when his body is no more. So he said, yes, there will not be any such intelligence functioning through the body. When the body goes, that also goes. But he left a ray of hope or possibility by saying that if you live the teachings, then you can have some touch of that intelligence. So, living the teachings, that is what he said. That is the only way to come in touch with that intelligence.
Is that a path?
No, not path, not path.
Living the teachings means LIV, sir. Not living.
But most people are following LEAV, so but it is actually LIV, yes. So actually in our last session we will be mostly considering this aspect, what is living the teachings and what way that intelligence one can have touch of that and in what way it can transform our lives. But I think this is as far as this world teacher taking over and starting his mission of setting man free. And he also said in his last statement that nobody has set himself free so far. That also he announced, so that nobody should claim that he is free as per whatever Krishna ji has talked and therefore assume an authoritative position. Because I think he foresaw all those things and therefore even before passing away, he made it sure that nobody is able to take any advantage from this. So, the further details of the core of the teachings we will consider in the next session. Now, I will invite questions from you to go more into this.
Surely, we said relationship is a mirror in which we see ourselves.
Yes.
But I see, sometimes I don't see that relationship also. That mirror may not be visible to me. I'm so occupied.
No, you don't have to see mirror. You see, if you are seeing mirror, then you are not seeing yourself.
And also, what relationship? So,
You have to see yourself. Forget about the mirror.
yeah, usually the simply
Because in the relationship, you see, when you interact with another person, in that interaction, whatever is within you comes out. Right? You may say that, yes, I am a very peaceful person, I don't react, right? And then in interaction, right, that reaction comes out. You show anger, you show displeasure, right? And then what happens to your statement that you don't react? So the reaction is visible in interaction only. When you are not interacting, sitting alone quietly in the privacy of your room, right, you are free from everything. You can say that you are the ideal person, not reacting anything. But it's only when you react, when you interact, that is where the real inside thing comes out.
are we suggesting we go on interact with many persons, see ourselves also sit alone, contemplate on teachings and find what is going on?
Both the things.
Right.
Yes.
And
And purposely relating ourselves, sir. Natural relationships.
Yeah, natural, of course. Yeah, no, if you deliberately go about it, then you can burn your hand. Yes. No, because some people took that kind of approach also. Like say a person, he says that, okay, watch your reaction, watch your anger. Now that person says, but I am not angry now, so how can I watch? Then he says, well, it's not very difficult, and he makes him angry. And then he says, now watch your anger. So that is not the approach. Yes.
And also Krishna is say to experience of sobriety, need not drink all kind of thing. So need not to go into things to know about something.
Oh, yes, I mean, yeah. I mean, to see the ill effects of alcohol or drinking too much of alcohol, you don't have to drink all that alcohol, you see. Otherwise, you may say that, yes, you have to experience everything firsthand, and only then you can talk authentically about it, right? And therefore, let me consume a lot of alcohol, experience whatever happens, right? And then I can say what happens. Or for that matter, narcotics and all those things. But Krishna says that's not necessary. It is also possible to learn from the other person's experience by observing the life of other person. So you are observing your life, but you can also observe the life of the other person. And by observing that, you can learn quite a lot. And the interesting thing is that Krishnaji mentioned in his dialogue with David Bohm that whatever psychological content he is talking about, he has not gone through any of that. He talks about fear, he talks about anger, he talks about violence, he talks about jealousy, hatred, all the negative psychological content, and he says he himself has never gone through it, which means he was never angry, he was never afraid, he never felt jealousy, he never felt pride. Now, if he himself has not gone through any of that, how could he talk so authentically about all these things? So he said, by observing others going through it. He observed human beings all over the world. He observed how they live their lives, how they react, what happens to them, and so on. And through that observation, he could learn about all these things. He himself didn't have to go through it.
Meaning of discipline also is same.
Yeah, self-discipline is also same, because you are imposing a lot of structure on yourself. And why are you doing that? Because you want to achieve something by doing that. So naturally, it is not a correct approach. But the discipline which comes out of understanding, right, that is something different. It's very interesting what Krishnamurti talks about. He says the word discipline comes from the word disciple, and disciple is the one who is learning, not necessarily only from the guru, but disciple is a person who is constantly learning. So, a discipline which comes out of learning, that is the natural discipline. Now, how discipline can come out of learning, right? I can give you an example. There was, or I think there was, probably he is no more, a very famous tabla player, Pandit Kishan Maharaj. He was from Banaras, from Varanasi. Expert tabla player. And many times in the Rajghat school, we had invited him to give this concert on tabla. In fact, one of his concerts, Krishnaji also attended. And on tabla, he played all kinds of things. All kinds of sounds he was able to play on tabla, like sound of a passing train, the sound of many different things. And Krishnaji listened to that concert, and after the end, Krishnaji came to me and asked for the recording of that concert. So, of course, I gave him a copy later. So, Pandit Kishan Maharaj, he was asked, how did you get such skill in this tabla playing? So, he said every day at 8 o'clock in the night, he used to sit for riyaz, for practicing, under the supervision of his father, and continued till 6 in the morning. Every day, and he said he did it for 12 years. So his interest in mastering this art of tabla playing. Now that interest, that means he was interested in learning that art. Now when you are interested in learning that art, then you employ all your resources to it. So which means that he found that if he eats too much in the night, he can't keep awake, he can't play. So he controlled how much he will eat in the night. Then he had to keep awake in the night, so he had to then take rest or sleep during the day at certain times. So just so that he is able to practice that tabla in that, so he had to make many changes in his lifestyle. So that is the discipline. That is the discipline which comes out of learning. When you want to learn something, and in order to learn that, when you have to mobilize all your resources, then you come to know what is not right for that learning. I mean, what could become an hindrance or impediment, and then you change that, you remove that, and orient all your life in such a way that you are able to learn that. So that orienting your life is a discipline, but it is not an imposed discipline. It is a discipline which you have voluntarily and gladly accepted because you want to learn something. So a discipline which is the outcome of this interest to learn. So that kind of discipline Krishnamurti talked about, not the imposed discipline where you already are given a framework, a pattern, and then you just try to conform to that pattern, because that kind of discipline becomes soon mechanical and you rebel against that pattern, and many times you just walk out of it. You say, it's enough, I am getting bored.
So, in observation, what is learning, sir, in psychological field? In observation, I see myself, I am not free, but I also say I am psychological free also. So, what is the learning?
The interesting thing is that in psychological field, you say, I have learned, and somebody asks, what have you learned? And you find that you have nothing to show, that this is what I have learned. At the physical level, you can show what you have learned. You can say, yes, I have learned driving, so you can show how you can drive. You say, I have learned music, so you can sing or play and show this is what you have learned, right? So at the physical level, you are able to show definitely that this is what I have learned. But in psychological field, when you say I have learned, you have nothing to show. In psychological field, what are you learning about? You are learning about your psychological reaction. You are learning about the psychological content of your consciousness, right? Now the interesting point is, when you have learned about a psychological reaction, the psychological reaction is no more. It's finished. So what are you going to show?
In one place he mentions like discarding the past or whatever.
Yes.
That means.
Yeah, so that is the ending the past. Yes, ending of the past. So when you say I have learned about anger, right? Then anger is gone, finished, and there is nothing to show.
Which means
right?
first step is taken, sir.
Yeah, the first step is taken already.
If we are then only all other things are
Yeah,
gone.
no, not all. What I am saying is, you want to study the reaction of anger, you want to learn about it, right? And you take a first step, that is learning about this anger through observing the anger, right? And when you have learnt about it, the anger is over, it is no longer there. And so, since anger is no longer there, you don't have to take the second step. In the first step itself, it is over.
Next day, there is no question of anger again cropping up.
That is up to you. at least for that time, for that kind of provocation, you have finished the anger. Like say, somebody saying bad thing to you and you used to get angry. Right? Now, by observing, watching and all these things, you have got over that anger. Now you say that yes, I am free from this kind of anger. So even if somebody says something bad to me, I don't get angry. I say, oh, it's just a fool. I mean, you don't bark at a dog because the dog is barking at you. So if somebody is saying bad things to you, you don't say in return bad things to him. I mean, and so you don't get angry also, because getting angry is getting disturbed, and you don't want to disturb your state of mind. So to that extent, you are free. But that doesn't mean that you have finished with all kinds of angers, because there will be still some content which is provocable in different ways by different things, and unless that is also worked out, there may not be freedom. So actually they say that you take any psychological content, it is related with the remaining psychological content. It's not in isolation. It is all connected. And therefore, as long as there is the other content also, you cannot be completely free of any one content. So which means that either you are free of the total content or you are not free. So then it is a relative freedom. That means, yes, for content corresponding to anger, I am relatively free in the sense that certain provocations I don't get angry, certain other provocations I still get angry, and so on. So that means I have to still work upon myself.
Yes. Yeah. What he meant by first step is last step. Is it ultimate thing he is speaking about, sir? Like mutation thing?
No, not ultimate.
See,
What he is saying that when the thing has happened in the very first step, you don't need to take second step, right? Because you are already free.
In that context.
Yeah, in that context.
that movement only.
Yeah. No, now does that mean that once you have taken the first step and you are out of this field of consciousness, you are already in a different dimension. Now in that different dimension, does that mean that you don't have to take any step? Doesn't mean that. Because now you are in a different dimension, so your life in a different dimension has begun. So there the movement and whatever is required, that you will be doing, right? But you don't have to take a second step from this dimension to that dimension. No second step is required. So which means that in one step only you can move to a different dimension. You don't need more than one step.
So we wanted, Krishnaji may be facing a lot of situations of anger, so many things. How was he? You were like
Yeah, I mean, Krishnaji, of course, I
public
don't.
speaking, someone speaks against maybe insulting situations because so much of position has passed.
No, I didn't see him react, or I didn't see him angry at any point of time. And only Krishnaji mentioned to an interviewer that in his lifetime, in Krishnamurti's lifetime, Krishnamurti got angry only once. And he said that the person with whom he got angry still keeps on reminding him that, see, you also got angry.
First step actually gives an understanding. And through that step itself, that is, he gains understanding. And in the situation, it is actually irreversible always. So that actually works in all spheres of life.
No, you said the first step is reversible?
Yeah, irreversible.
No, the step itself is not reversible, but what happens is the person falls back. It's not that you jump and in the same way you come back. It's not like that, but the person falls back in the sense because there is still the content which he has not yet finished or which he has not yet learnt about, and therefore he falls back. Of course, there is also another way. That means this is the approach that as and when the reaction comes, you observe it, learn about it, and then the reaction goes. And then like that, as and when it happens. Yes. But Krishnaji has also pointed out a possibility that you don't have to watch reactions one by one. At one glance, you can see the whole field of consciousness and understand all its intricacies and whatever that is. And once you have taken the whole view of the field of consciousness, then you are already free of that.
Everything. Which means that is the first step as per his teaching. Sir.
That is the only step.
That is the only
step. There is no further
Which
step.
means meditation.
Yes. Which means meditation.
It means irreversible.
Pardon?
It means irreversible.
Yeah, irreversible.
That is irreversible.
That is irreversible.
It's like a quantum jump.
Yeah.
It's more like a flash of understanding.
Yeah, flash of understanding, it's an
It's
insight.
more like
Yeah, it's an insight, a flash of understanding, yes.
You mentioned about different periods,
Yes.
what were the teachings after 98.
Yes.
So how is it different from the previous years?
The expression. For example, I'll give an example. He was talking about changing yourself, right? Then he says, but change is always taken as from here to there. So I am this and I want to change into that. And he said that is not the real change. Then he said that he only called as the modified continuity. The kind of change we talk about, he says it's actually modified continuity, it is not change at all. Then he said radical change, changing radically. Then he was not happy with that expression also. So he talked about the psychological revolution. And then he talked about total psychological revolution. Then he talked about radical psychological revolution. Then he talked about transformation. And finally he settled on the word mutation. Yeah. So mutation, he felt that more or less represents what kind of change he is talking about. So in that way the expression changed. Initially he used to talk about brain and mind. So many times he would say brain and many times he would say mind. So people used to get confused. So somebody asked him, sir, you have been talking about this thing, so can you make it very clear that what do you mean when you talk about mind? Do you mean mind or you mean brain only? So he said, I'm in brain only. So that means he was using both the words, mind and brain, for the brain. But later on, he started distinguishing these two words. He said, no, brain is different, mind is different. And then he was very particular when he was talking. If he wanted to talk about the brain, he will say brain. If he wanted to talk about the mind, he would say mind. And so after he started differentiating between these two words, then the confusion of people even increased, because then they started asking, then what is the difference between brain and mind?
Even thought and time also he uses interchangeably.
Yeah.
Thought and time also. Was interchangeably.
So the brain and mind, what is the difference? So when you are such a question, he used to be asked, he would explain what is brain, right? And then about the mind, he will add many more things to that, and he will say all this total is the mind. But then that didn't throw much light on what exactly he meant by mind. So actually you have to, I think, study through many dialogues, particularly with David Bohm and other things, to come to grips with what probably he means by mind. I mean, although he had tried to define in terms of the consciousness, in terms of the content, in terms of so many things. I mean, he says it includes all. And yet we don't get the grasp of what exactly he means by the mind. And many times he says that the mind contains the brain, not brain contains the mind contains the brain. And sometimes he says that mind is outside the brain. So all these statements are there. Pardon?
I understand. Yes. Maybe I don't know, I'm correct or wrong.
Yeah.
The brain, what he is talking of, is a physical matter actually, containing your cells and all the parts of the brain.
Right.
Whereas the mind, what he is talking about, is the thinking, the thought which is cropped up from your brain cells, which are deeply, interwoven inside the brain.
Yeah.
Once that gets triggered, then that will be the act of the mind. And that's what I understood, that is how the difference of the mind and brain. And the difference of the thought and the time, thought is also, trigger coming from the brain, and it is in the framework of your own thinking, which is a psychological time. Of course, both are synonymous, but I felt that he was using rightly when he said time and thought. That's my understanding.
Sir, can they be correlated with the CPU, the brain, material part of brain, the cells of brain, or that tissue, brain, and the software? The software operates and comes out the result. That is our thinking process.
No, but if you take that similarity, can there be software without hardware? There cannot be. But there can be mind without the brain.
But
He
not
talks-
individual's mind.
No, he talks about universal mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, he talks about universal mind. Yeah. He talks about universal mind.
Universal mind, what I understood is, mind is mind for anybody. Maybe you are thinking of something, I am thinking of something, he is thinking of something, which are all part of thinking only. So it is no way different from your thinking and my thinking. The thinking is same, and the cycle what we are following is the same. As long as we are trapped in that, it may be for you or for me, it is the same thing. So that is a total consciousness and the act of the time what he is talking about.
No, he differentiates between consciousness and mind also. And second thing, when he talks about quiet mind, means when no thinking is happening, and if thinking is the mind, then when no thinking, that means no mind.
In one
No,
place he
no,
says,
no, sir.
Then
thinking without fasting,
Thinking
not
is
thinking.
not there, but your brain cells are totally free, where you have the
no, brain cells are okay. I mean, they are there. But then what is the mind then if thinking is not happening? If mind is thinking and if thinking is not happening, then where is the mind?
There is no mind. I mean,
So there is no mind. Yes.
No,
Yes.
there is no mind means,
Yes.
we are sane. It is not that we
Yeah,
are
yeah.
insane. It is totally active in silence.
No.
It's more or less maybe thought taking its own place, and then maybe the quality of mind comes into.
No. I mean, let us not speculate or try to interpret. You see, if somebody happens to offend certain person, and that person is nice, he says, no, don't mind. And this person says, no, don't worry, I have no mind. So you see, the mind is not the content of consciousness. It is the content of consciousness which is similar. That's what Krishnaji has said, that we share the human consciousness. Our consciousness is part of that. And so, but when he talks about mind, he talks only about the universal mind, not your mind or my mind, right? But it is a human mind. Right? And then he goes about it. So, when the mind is quiet and still, the content of consciousness is completely inactive. Yeah, when the mind is still or quiet, the content of consciousness is completely inactive. It's not active. Means the thought is also silent.
One place he says, thinking
Because when the
without
content of consciousness is active, that means the thought is active.
Yeah, that is understood.
Yes.
But when the mind is
Yes. Yeah. So we are talking about the mind. We are saying that when the mind is still, that only means that the content of consciousness is not active. It is inactive. The thought is not active. Thought is quiet. Yeah. And then in such a mind, the space, then in that case mind is equivalent to space. In that space, then things which are not of the thought, not of the content of consciousness, they can happen in that space.
It's no more personal.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
Not personal, yeah. Mind is not personal. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Despite knowing our psychological peace is important, we are nourishing our physical body. So, what would be the reason we are giving much priority to physical nourishment? Or, and one more extension, sir. Is this psychological nourishment like this program?
What is that? Is the psychological
Nourishment.
nourishment? Okay. So, what is the psychological nourishment? More psychological food to think over, ponder over, more content of consciousness, right? So, may not be, but we can say that yes, there are challenging questions which can challenge the brain, and to resolve which the brain has to use its resources to face that challenge. That means then the brain has to think logically, rationally, use its resources in order to face this challenge. And so in that sense, you can say that yes, maybe some of the Krishnamurti's statements are food for thought or food for the brain to investigate. And without maybe such food, maybe the brain will not be healthy. Because the brain, only when you try to understand something, then the brain opens up, then the brain develops. But if you are just passively living, say entertainment, it is just a passive action of experiencing sensation. So you just have a sensation or feeling and you just passively experience it, and maybe you indulge in acts which will generate that sensation or feeling, and so you are just passively experiencing it. There is no question of understanding or utilizing the full potential of the brain, and therefore brain doesn't develop then. So some people, what they do, they say that just as you need exercise for the body, you need exercise for the brain also. So some of the people, they have started what is called as brain gym. So in brain gym, they will give various tasks for your brain to go through so that the brain also becomes healthy. Because to do those tasks, you have to really use your brain. And when you use your brain, naturally it remains healthy. So that brain gym. But all those things, they are mechanical. I mean, soon those exercises also, they become mechanical and brain stops developing. I mean, you must have observed that some of the brain teasing games, like say Sudoku. Now solving Sudoku later on becomes so mechanical that I mean, it doesn't do much to your brain. I mean, you just mechanically go about it, solve it, step by step approach, and then it is finished. So it doesn't develop the brain.
Means inner engineering is a myth. Inner engineering is a myth.
Inner engineering is a myth. Inner engineering is a myth.
Is a myth.
Is a myth.
Yeah, inner engineering is the myth, yes. Yeah. Because there is nothing to engineer. Because that point, I think we were diverted from making that point explicitly. That when you are learning about the psychological content, then when the learning is complete, that psychological content is no more. It is finished. And therefore, Krishnaji says there is nothing to learn. Right? Because the very thing about which you are trying to learn, that very thing disappears due to your learning, and then you have nothing to learn.
Individuals are at different levels of evolution, and some may require the inner engineering also.
May require
They require inner engineering also.
inner engineering.
Now, what is inner engineering? I mean, what is being achieved through psychological engineering, right? I mean, you can say that, well, I can think of psychological management, right? In the sense that I can't be free of my psychological reactions, right? I keep on reacting. I observe and all these things, but still the reactions, they arise. Then the other alternative is to manage those reactions, right? And that managing the psychological reactions, that art is very much part of the training of diplomats, how to manage your psychological reactions so that they don't spoil your whatever you are negotiating for. And so at least that one may have to learn, right? And so, if you learn to manage, then to quite some extent, maybe your problems in relationship will be solved to quite a larger extent. But you will not be free of those problems, because managing these things are valid only up to a point. But many times when the threshold is crossed, then you burst out of your reaction. So managing is a way of controlling your behavior in spite of these reactions arising in you. For example,
but he says the role of psychologists are not required, because once you understand, say, your psychological process, so that will come to an end by itself. So because you are not able to understand deeply, so you will be in that state to go for a psychological help. So he says all psychologists are money makers.
Also neuratics.
Huh?
Also neurotic.
No, unless your patient is a neurotic, in the sense some problem with the physical brain or some chemical, bodily some problem is there, that is okay. But as far as the psychological content is concerned, so somebody is depressed, somebody is angry. So such things to deal with, you don't need a psychologist.
yes, I mean, what actually happens is when a person is not able to manage himself due to his psychological reactions, and therefore he needs the help. I mean, what happens is that when that reaction goes out of control, unmanageable, then it is like an illness which needs therapy. And so you have to go to psychotherapist in order to get out of that situation. But as long as you are not letting it to flare up to that extent, then you are able to manage them at your level. So you don't need to go. It's like you live your life healthily, you don't have to go to doctor. But when you are unable to manage your health, right, you fall ill, then you need to go to doctor. So in the psychological way also, I mean, you are not able to, say somebody feeling very depressed and almost wanting to commit suicide out of depression, and finding very difficult to control, and even making attempts to commit suicide. Now, such a person, I mean, one needs to take to the psychiatrist and see in what way that person can be helped, and his this reaction can be managed and reduced to a level where the person can just manage it for himself or herself.
We were talking about the reactions. Once you have learned the reactions, there is nothing more to do
Yes.
for the brain. So does the brain become dull then?
No. This is what is the interesting thing. I mean, the brain becomes dull due to repetitive action, mechanical action. But when something is over, there is space in the brain. It's not dull. But usually what happens is that whenever there is space in the brain, and since you are not accustomed to that space, you try to fill it up through some activity or other. And when you fill up that space through some activity or other, and that activity then becoming mechanical, makes the brain dull again. So we'll stop for the break and we'll meet next session. Yeah.